I'm giving now a workshop about snap automation, and this is an interactive workshop. I will give you some exercises during the session. And as we have started a little bit late, I think we will run a little bit perhaps into the lunch break. I hope it's no problem. But you will do some exercises, and for this, I've already written in the description to download in the description on the schedules of our nice Indico site to download my slides so that you can browse them also by yourself while doing exercises. And in the beginning, in the setup section, there are some links to GitHub repositories. And you should fork them. Perhaps one or another has already seen it and has forked them, because you need your own copy to them, because one thing is you will have to release them. So as in our workshop, we will learn a method so that when you are snapping an application and the upstream components of it, when some upstream is releasing, then automatically your snap is updated. And as you cannot release any project of someone else, you are forking the GitHub repositories, and when they are on your own GitHub, you can release whenever you want. And so you will release them several times during this workshop. And one thing is, originally, I planned to do it with Heather Ellsworth. Heather Ellsworth has developed the GitHub action which you will apply during this workshop. Unfortunately, she's not at Canonical anymore, and therefore Jesus is helping me. And I hope also some people of the Snap squad of the Ubuntu desktop team have already joined here too, or will join during the workshop and also help. And at first, thank you very much also to Heather to create this great GitHub action. And she partially also did it together with Sergio Costas. Is Sergio Costas on board? Yes. And he will also help during the exercises. And so this is, I already told to you, download my slides, go to the Ubuntu Summit website, in the schedules, in the description for this session, under presentation materials, you can download a PDF file. Please download it if you have not done so. And what we will learn is to use GitHub actions and workflows. What are GitHub actions? What are GitHub actions? What are GitHub actions and workflows? And hello, is the mic still working? Yeah. Yes. What are GitHub actions and workflows? Because this is the essence of automation in GitHub, that you can automate processes. You will learn how to update your Snapcraft YAML on each new release of one of your upstream sources, and also auto building and auto uploading, so that on each commit you do into your GitHub repository of the snap will be automatically, the snap will be built on a build server, Launchpad, and after that, the resulting snap uploaded into the Snap Store. In our exercises, we will only let Launchpad build it. We will not go up to the Snap Store to not clutter the Snap Store with exercises. And we will also, I will also show how it is possible to do it when you have a development branch and a stable branch. And what you already need to know is snapping, meaning to package an application as a snap. So if you were last year in Prague on the Ubuntu Summit, then perhaps Heather has taught it to you. And And also you need to know the basics of using Git. And so, and I do it all. I'm doing in a total of 3 workshops. The beginning one to learn snapping and Daemon Snappers workshop, and this one. And I do it to get people learning Snap, helping snapping applications, especially the ones who are not snapped by upstreams. There, it would be great if you join the Snapcrafters community. And also, if you are upstream maintainer of a project, the best way is you as upstream maintainer also snap your stuff and put it into the Snap store. As the upstream is the most trusted, and the upstream is also the ones who knows most about the application and what the Snap must be able to. And with all this, we will get a great Snap store and also great Ubuntu Core desktop. So for the setup, every one of you, I hope many did it already, you will find, once you must be connected to the Wi-Fi here so that you can use Git. You will use GitHub a lot now. And so you must have internet access. You will not just download the exercises and do all locally. And you need a web browser, a text editor, and the command line utility Git. And also, you need accounts on GitHub for the first part of the workshop and on Launchpad for the second part, on Launchpad on the second part of the workshop. And here are the links to the GitHub repositories. So download the slides and click these links. And of each of the first 3, of each of them, of all the 4, you will have to fork them so that you have a copy, your own copy in your own account of GitHub. Please do that if you did not do it yet, because you need your own copy, as once you have to be able to push into them. And second, you have to be able to take them to make a release, because you will make releases of your own copies of these sample apps so that your GitHub action deployed to the last one will auto update when it sees when one of the other 3 got released by you. And especially important is then also in the snapcraft.yaml, where there are links to these 3 upstream sources. You must modify the links that here is not till Kamppeter anymore, but your username, so that your fork is used. So that when you release your fork, that your SnapHub actions actually sees that something happened. So I want to ask you to do this right now if you did not do it yet. Anyone has any problems, any questions about that? Yes, all the 4. Yes, because the 3 first, yes, we need to fork all the 4 GitHubs as the first 3 GitHubs. Yes, they are our applications, our upstream sources for our Snap. And the 4th one is the GitHub of our Snap. This is the GitHub where we will apply the GitHub action, so that when you release one of the first 3, that the 4th one gets updated. And for forking, what I usually do, I go to the web interface of the GitHub, and at the top right, there's a fork button. And with this fork button, you can fork it into your account. And when forking, simply keep the original name of them. And then what results, what the resulting fork, which you will have, will be the resulting fork which you will have the same URL as you see there, only with a till Kamppeter replaced by your username. And so when you have done so, then you get to your fourth fork, to the one for the snap. And in this one you clone so that you can edit the files. And you edit the snapcraft.yaml to put in your URLs as the source URLs for the 3 parts. And this you commit and push so that the GitHub of your snap is based on your sources and not on my sources. So I can pass on with the slides. Everyone has downloaded the slides instead of now typing these URLs. Yes, what we actually want to do when you are, as I already explained, when you are snapper of an application, often you do not include only the application itself in your snap, but many dependencies, as a snap brings its dependencies so that it gets distro independent. And so you have many parts from upstream, and many parts of any upstream software which your snap, when it builds, is building. And then you can easily, even if you even maintain more than one snap, for example, if you are actually at the snap crafters and you are snapping like hell that we get a lot of nice snaps, then you easily lose track with the upstream releases when some library of, for example, I have a snap with contains 20 printer drivers, so it has 20 parts or so, and there's easy to lose track when one gets a new release. And so if you have automated it, it helps greatly that we will have up-to-date snaps in the Snap Store, and the Ubuntu core desktop users will thank you very especially, because they have to use snaps. And so our example is that our sources, our snap is principally a snap where we snap the application named app1. And this app1, to work properly, needs 2 other dependencies, libraries or so. And in our example, we call these dependencies app2 and app3. Your snap, the version number of your snap, is always the version number of app1. It will simply be, it simply grabs the version number from the upstream source. And now it can happen once in a while, app1 gets an update from upstream, sometimes app3, sometimes app2, sometimes even 2 on the same day. And every time when this happens, you would need to update your snap. And if you do it manually and you are managing 20, 30 snaps, it gets awkward. And so, and also, if you have something where upstream is very nice in terms of developing and enthusiasm of developing and releasing often, but they are not very snappy. They really don't like snap. And so you have decided to snap their stuff. And so with the snap automation, if someone upstream releases, your snap will get updated. So requirement for this to work is that your snapping, the Git repository for your snapping is on GitHub, as there we will apply a GitHub app action. But the upstreams can use any Git, because we only need from upstream that we can grab Git tags from them to find out whether they did a release automatically. So it can also be GitLab, for example, because you see when you have a GNOME application, GNOME is usually using GitLab, or when you want to use the source of a Debian package, they use also GitLab. And so this also works. So it's simply Git, which is needed for the upstream sources. And in most cases, this is the case. It's very rare that you will not get this. And so the automation usually you can actually make use of. And what you have, and what is important here is that in the snapcraft.yaml, you should not download the applications using the release tarballs. If the snapcraft.yaml does that, you have to edit it. And it should take as the source code the Git repository. And it uses a source tag. It should use the source tag directive here too, so that it actually downloads the point in time of the release and not the top of the development. So this is the first app. This is app 1 in the in the snapcraft.yaml. The snapcraft.yaml is called snap automation example. The same, and this is, and you have here the adopt info app 1. This means we do not take the version number, description, and similar metadata hard-coded in the snapcraft.yaml, but we take them, or at least a part of it, we can decide which part, we take them from the part app 1. And we have here app 1, we download it from Git, and we use the plugin make, as when you look into the repository of app 1, it has a make file, a ready-made make file, no configure or so. And we do, and this override, we have this override pull here. This means when downloading it, we use custom action and not just download it as the first lines describe it. At first, we download it, like described by the first lines. We are via craft ctl default. This does the default action. And then we add one action. This command here, craft ctl set version, to the result of this command. The result of this command is the release, the reference to the last commit of the downloaded Git. And when we download a Git with a release tag, then it's just the name of the release tag. And this we put to the internal variable version, and therefore the version of the snap will be the version of the upstream code. And one thing is important, again, when you have your snapcraft.yaml, make sure that the upstream sources are not my original ones, because I'm not releasing, you are releasing, so you must have your forks. So with your username in the URL. You could, if you want, when you have Snapcraft installed, also locally build the snap. But this is not important for this workshop, and so you do not need to try now to make your laptop ready for running Snapcraft if it is not. So let us come to the GitHub automation. GitHub is a sophisticated hosting service for Git repositories, which gives you all the needed services which an open source project needs. The repository, you can report bugs and feature requests and pull requests, and you can discuss on it and so on, so that you can work in a team on a Git repository. And one thing is you can do tasks automatically. It is mainly done that on each push into a GitHub repository, the code is automatically compiled and tested. So you have automatic CI testing, so that you make sure that that you do not introduce a regression with your next step, with your current step of development. And if a regression happens, that you will see it in a few seconds or minutes how long your CI testing takes. And the CI testing is always done because of the automation. Yes, this. But there are more forms of automation. You can do an automation of on every commit. Also, for example, to upload the resulting compiled code to somewhere, to package and upload it to somewhere with each commit. This is also possible. But you can also do a cron job-like automation. This means that the workflow, a workflow is a definition of an automation in GitHub. And the workflow also can be run time-based. For example, once a day, once an hour or so. We will run ours once a day. So once a day, we will check whether one or another of the upstreams has released. And we can also manually trigger it by a button in the GitHub web interface. And this is mainly for development and debugging, so that you can test your GitHub workflow and does not need to wait a day when the next cron job comes. Especially this is important, as this workshop is only a 60-minute slot, not a 24-hour slot. And I want to not sit here with you all the time during the night until the cron job will be hitting. and you define the workflow in your snap repository. So you take the snap repository, which you have cloned, which you have forked, you clone it to your laptop, you create this directory in it, and in this directory you create files with a YAML, YML extension, no A, not as in snapcraft.yaml, but it's the same format. GitHub has decided to use YML. And in this, you have to define the workflow. And there you define the trigger rules, how you want to get it triggered, when. Then you define tasks which will be done. And the tasks can either be shell scripts, which you directly write into the workflow file, or it can be also a so-called GitHub action. A GitHub action is another specialized GitHub repository, which defines an action. And you can call this action. This action is some program. It's like a subroutine, like a library function. And GitHub itself has even a library of actions for standard functionality, like downloading a GitHub repository. And when this action happens, then you get a log of this action, and you find this log in the web interface of your GitHub, so of your Snaps GitHub. You do this all in your Snaps GitHub, not in the upstream GitHubs. And there's a tab at the top named Actions, and under Actions you find the logging. And in the case of a failure of a GitHub workflow, when some script exits with a non-zero. This is usually the case when in your CI testing is a regression, or when you have now in the exercises made a typo and therefore your script is not running. Then you get an email notification that your script has failed, that your workflow has failed. So in GitHub, a GitHub action is you have a GitHub repository which has some which has some executable program scripts inside, and you have in this GitHub repository you don't have one in your examples because we use one of Canonical, is a file named action.yaml in the main directory, and this action.yaml looks a little bit similar to the workflow YAML file, and it defines what has to be done when the GitHub action is called. For example, which programs in this repository need to be called and with which parameters and so on. And repository usually can have only one single action because there's only once the name action.yaml. And so for each action which we need an extra repository. Therefore, we have in GitHub, on the GitHub, we have one organization named actions. And in these actions, there are something like 60 repositories, and each are useful functions for your workflows. But one can make actions by themselves. You can make actions by yourself if you need. So now let us create our workflow. So you have forked the 4 repositories, you have cloned them to a laptop, and now you go into the repository which is for the snapping, and there you have a snapgraph.yaml. And now what I show here on the slide is the snapgraph.yaml of one program which already uses our Git automation. So this is not the snapgraph.yaml. This is the workflow file. This is the workflow file of the GNOME text editor. This uses already our snapgraph automation. And you see here, it has a name, and this name is simply a reference. This name is simply shown at the top of the log in the web interface when it's executed, so that you easily find your GitHub actions in the your GitHub workflow in the logs. Then here is how it gets triggered, and there are 2 methods how it gets triggered. One is schedule, which means we have a cron job, and this cron job should go every day at 9:07 in the morning. And this means every 24 hours it gets executed. This is good enough for the daily use. It's a very long interface for a workshop which takes only 1 hour. And also, we want to develop it, we want to test it before we let it go. So we add another method, which is called workflow dispatch, without any parameters. And workflow dispatch allows manual triggering. So in the Actions tab in the web interface, you will get at this workflow with this name, you will get a button so that you can trigger the workflow by hand, and then it is executed immediately, and you can even follow the logging live. And now a workflow does not need to only get triggered, it must also do something. And so we have the jobs part, we have a name for the job, and we have an operating system. We want to run it on the current Ubuntu release. And current release is a good thing, as usually we are maintaining our snap and we want to work that everything works on current software. And So the steps to do is, at first we need to download our snap repository where the snapcraft YAML is inside. So we run the standard action in the actions organization, which is created by GitHub, with the name checkout, and we want to get the v3. This is a tag in the action/checkout repository named v3. This is the current version of this action. And so this simply does git clone and our repository for the snapping, the repository in which we have defined this workflow file. Then we have the second step, run desktop snaps actions. These names are only for the logging. So they are shown in the logs. And there we use also a GitHub action, but it is an action of the in the GitHub desktop snaps of the organization Ubuntu. And this is the magic which Heather and Sergio have made. This is the GitHub action which analyzes the snapcraft.yaml, which upstream sources are there, and checks for each source whether there's a newer version. And inside this repository, we take the stable branch. And this GitHub action does not work without supplying parameters. And the parameters are a token and a repo. The repo is our repo. This is an internal variable which puts in the URL of our snapping repo, the repo in which we have defined this file. And the token is an authentication token. So the external action in Ubuntu desktop snaps is allowed to make changes in our own repository. So you should copy and paste the whole file from the slide deck or from this repository. You can also do it from this URL. You can also download this URL simply. And you will put it into your snapping repository, so the Snapcraft example, into .github workflows. This is the first part of what you have to do. So, as I've already explained here. This is the cron job style execution plus the manual execution for testing. So now this I have also explained. You have the step. We use these users to run external actions. And we need to tell the Ubuntu the Ubuntu desktop action. We must tell it the name, the URL of our repository, and also the authentication token of our repository. Our repository has this already there, has the internal variables, and sends this to the GitHub action of Ubuntu desktop. So what exactly happens is inside this repository, Ubuntu desktop snaps, you have a file action YAML. And in this file is described once that it needs the repository URL and the token as input parameters. And it is also, and it is running shell script and other actions like a workflow, and this is defined in action.yaml. And and the actual script which does the actual checking is in update snap YAML .py, and this it goes through every source Git upstream source Git repository, checks the current tag of it. Is the current tag higher than the tag referenced in your Snapcraft YAML? It updates the tag, and then it does commit and push of your updated snapcraft.yaml. And now your snapcraft.yaml must be prepared for it. It cannot be the way how the snapcraft.yaml which I've given to you. And you see one thing. The source must be the GitHub URL, and important, your username here. And source type is Git, and the source tag is the version which you are currently using. And the source depth has two functions. One, it tells the update script, yes, this GitHub we want to update. On this source GitHub, from this source GitHub we want to update. And source depth 1 also says we want to have only the current step of the history and not download the whole history. So the whole snap build will be faster. And you have to edit your snapcraft.yaml. You should look into your snapping example. There you have a snapcraft.yaml, and you should look for the 3 parts, whether they are really fulfilling what I'm asking you here. Could you please do that? And if so, if it's not the case, edit appropriately. And another thing is, what you also add is this extension. These comments in the snapcraft.yaml, they are not read by Snapcraft when you build the snap. Snapcraft simply skips comment lines. But the script which Sergio and Heather have written reads these lines and parses them. And there's a version format section, and it says lower than 2. This means if the new version, if the tag of the new version is version 2 or later, then it's ignored. Then we don't update. This is simply if our stable generation, which we are snapping, is generation 1, 1.1, 1.2, and so on. But the developers are already with the top of the Git in version 2, that we do not automatically update into a new generation, as there are often problems like changes in API or so. Any question? Oh, one person is already giving up. So, no. And no, you don't need to make any secrets. Yes, you don't need to create any secrets. This GitHub is doing automatically. Therefore, in the workflow file, we give as parameter the internal variable for the GitHub token.
About the comments, they must the script just remove the sharp at the beginning.
Yes.
So they must follow the YAML.
Yes, you must. Yes, you must internally. The sharp has to be in the first, all in one column, in the first column, and internally these must be indented in YAML format, so that what is inside the comment block is by itself a YAML file again. So that when the script is interpreting these lines, it cuts off the sharp marks, and then the script is is parsing these 4 lines as a YAML file. And so these ones, version format, and lower than, the lower than is indented. So the lower than is a sub parameter of version format. And the no 9x revisions 2 means that if the version number found in the upstream is 1.9.1, 1.9.5, these version numbers are also ignored because 1.9 versions often are development versions. So these are some kind of beta versions which are approaching the next generation, which are approaching generation 2, for example, 2.0. And there are many more variables here which one can use, and they are documented on in the Ubuntu /desktop snaps repository where the script is. So now you know what you have to do, but you have one thing is you have to edit your snapcraft.yaml and you have to add the workflow definition file in this .github/workflows directory. And one thing is nice, the workflow definition file, you do not need to change. You can simply copy the one from my slide deck, or you can copy the one from GNOME text editor. It's always the same one. And one additional thing, so that it works, is the script in the Ubuntu /desktop snaps repository must be allowed to commit and push in your repository, in your snapping repository. And therefore, in your snapping repository, in the web interface of it, you have to go onto the settings tab. And on the settings tab, you have to on the left sidebar find actions, and under action, click on actions. Under actions, you find general, and under code and automation. And in this section, there's action permissions, which must be set to allow all actions and reusable workflows. And there's workflow permissions, and it must be set to read and write permissions. And this is important. If you don't do that, your sources will get investigated, the snapcraft.yaml will get updated, but then it will not get committed and pushed, so your repository does not change, and you get an email that your workflow failed because the last step failed. And in the logs before the failure, you see that updated versions got found. So what you have to do now at first is that every one of you in the forked repositories edits snapcraft.yaml so that each component is downloaded from GitHub with the URL of your fork. And you also take care that there are the source tag and source depth parameters, and also these extension x::updates block. You can copy and paste it from the examples in the slides. And this is what you have to do on snapcraft.yaml. You have to add the copied and pasted workflow file in .github/workflows, and the file name has to end with a .yml. And when you have done so, you go into the settings and you give this permission which I have mentioned. And after having done all this, you can already go onto the Actions tab, select the workflow name, and you can, with the button on the right, manually trigger it. And what you will see is that no new no new versions are found. Perhaps you will see that a new version gets found and your snap, your Snapcraft YAML will get updated, but would be the case if when you have edited snapcraft.yaml, you mistyped a version number and so typed a lower version number than the actual version number of the upstream source. So, and when you have all done this, so that you have prepared the workflow, you can start the workflow manually and so on. The next step is to make releases of the sources. But at first, let us see whether every one of you is able to create this workflow. Anyone has questions, and if anyone gets stuck, simply ask me.
I'm going to start with just to say it out loud. All the when the GitHub runs those snaps, is it going to be looking at all the apps that have been listed? Like
Yes. When the GitHub action is running, it goes through all the parts of your Snapcraft YAML, and on each part, which downloads the source from Git, which has a source tag and a source depth, each of these parts will be checked. The upstream of it will be checked. Whether it has a higher tag. And if it has a higher tag, your source tag will be replaced by the higher tag in the snapcraft.yaml. And the snapcraft.yaml will get updated. And it will be done, test checked for each part. So if there are two parts which got a new release, you also get an update, and you get an update. Your update will update the two parts. Yes. You do not need to add these controls. You can choose which controls you want to have. In the repository Ubuntu/desktop snaps, where the script is located, there are README files. There's a main README file, and I think in the subdirectory for the script is also a README file. And in these README files, there's everything documented. Also the variables which you can use in this x:update. You can, for example, also have an upstream, which does not say the version, the release tag is simply 1.0.1, but it is the word release minus 1.0.1. But this tag, the script will not automatically recognize as release tag. It will only recognize either only the version number 1.0.1 or v 1.0.1, but nothing else. If it's different, you have to tell the format, and this you do with the x:update tool. You can give then a format scheme there. It is described in the documentation, and this way any kind of release text can be extracted, and the version number in them can be found and compared whether it's a newer one.
so this is the error. It's happening when running the py script update snap script. But I didn't write that update snap script, so I don't know why it is looking for a thing.
Here, look at the slide.
Yeah, it is not a GitHub.
Yes, it's not a GitHub. You must switch to the GitHub's URL.
It is GitHub, but it's a tar.
Yes. But it must look like the one from F1, only without F1 replaced by F2. Yes, we cannot use release tarballs. One thing is important. If you have a deeper look into the snapcraft.yaml file, which I've given you in the example, there are three parts. And have a very special look into the second part, up to. There's because there's one thing which is complete, which breaks our updating process because it's not correct for it. Have someone seen what is there wrong with up to? What? Yes, yes, yes. You have to use the URL of the GitHub of app2. And also don't forget that you use your fork, that you use the one with your username. Yes, we are 5 minutes to the official end, but I think we will do 5 to 10 minutes more so that we can finish the exercise. Because after that is lunch. And we had so much to eat in the hallway sessions. I think you should not be that hungry. What? Fine. You are maintaining a snap. Which one?
The spec snap.
Spec snap. What is that?
It's a package manager for HPC systems.
Ah, great. So we have someone who actually has already a use for the workshop. What? Ah, yes, that's great. Yes, yes. I hope many of the Snapcrafters are here. Are there more Snapcrafters in the room? Yes, only Ken. You? Someone else? What? Yes. Yes, the people are the other Snapcrafters are in boring talks. Yes, and unfortunately, Lucy is sick. She wants to also to come here, and she had for sure been also in the room when she had been here. I hope she will get better soon. That we will see her again. Any further questions? Anyone more here who is stuck? Ah, yes. No, no. Have you made sure that you have in the workflow file that you have copied the complete workflow file that the trigger for manual action is there? Then you go to the Actions tab in the web interface of your Snap repository of where the snapping is, and on the Actions tab, you will find the name of the workflow on the left. You click on the name, you get a button on the right, and with this button, you trigger the workflow immediately. Is this the web interface? From the repository for this. You are in the log already. Yes, so you have done a manual trigger. Oh, Did you edit in the snapcraft.yaml the part for app 2 that it uses actually the GitHub URL and not the tarball? Yes, yes. So only if you have done these changes, you can manually run the workflow so that it actually completes. No, it's not. So very, very important that you do the stuff which I have explained for the permissions under settings. If you forget to do this, the workflow will check for updates, and when it's done and wants to push the change snapcraft.yaml, it gets a permission denied. So before actually triggering manually the workflow, make sure that the permissions under settings are set as I described. Yes, and make sure that in all the three parts you have the snapcraft, you have the source tag and the source step. And it has at least one tag. One thing is important. In the snapcraft.yaml, you must have the source tag. You cannot use source branch instead. It must be source tag because we want to find a tag and we want to replace the tag we have by the tag we find. So important is also that the sources, where I've given the examples app1, app2, app3, they have tags. They must be already in the beginning have at least one tag before the first update is done, because otherwise you cannot download them with a source tag reference. So they must have at least one tag. The ones which I've created, and when you fork them correctly, they have already tags. But if you do something wrong and have lost the tags, you have to create a tag. And to do an update, to see how it does the automatic work to update your snap when an update happens, you need to, when upstream release happens, you need to create a new tag on one of app 1, app 2, or app 3, and then run the workflow again, and it will find that there's a new tag. You must have naturally a new version number in this tag. That there's a new tag, and then it will replace the old tag by the new tag in snapcraft.yaml. To have the authority, I asked you to fork the origin. In general, it is that you are not, that upstream is doing releases. For example, you are snapping gnome-calculator, and the GNOME developers do a new release of gnome-calculator. Then they put a tag, and within 24 hours, or when you trigger it manually because you have seen their release announcement in a mailing list, then the script finds the new tag which the GNOME developers have put, and based on this tag, they update your snapcraft.yaml. And when after that you build your snap, it is built with the newest version of gnome-calculator. Yeah, it is only possible in this case to have to make a snap from released versions of the upstream software, from software which has the release tag, as he is asking whether one can take a specific commit from upstream. If you want to have always the newest commit from upstream, you don't need the workflow. You simply reference as the upstream source the URL for the GitHub repository and do not specify source tag, and then it always takes the latest commit. Yes. So if you have one part which should not be the latest release, but should be the latest commit, this you take out of the automation by not specifying the source tag, and then it takes the newest commit also. And also, if you use source branch, it takes always the newest commit in that branch. Yes. This one will be out of the snap automation with a branch. This one will this one on every build which you do, it will take the latest commit, but it will not auto build whenever the upstream does a commit. For this one, would need to create another action. So, any other questions? Anyone arrived at the point of having created a new release of app 1, app 2, or app 3 and run the workflow again and see that the workflow is updating the snapcraft.yaml? What? So what does it tell in the... So he has the problem that he has triggered the workflow, but snapcraft.yaml did not get updated. So you have to look in the log and see, there you can see whether it found new versions or not. If it did not find new versions, the snapcraft.yaml does not get updated and nothing gets committed or pushed. Yes. You must look in where the update script is running in the logs. Are these the log? Which log? What is this? Yes, because it's a lot. Can I? Yes, for example, there are several versions of GTK and they change APIs. They are all available, these several versions. And then your application is probably written for a certain API version, for example, GTK 3, and it does not work with the GTK 4. So you would need to exclude GTK 4 by doing the appropriate less than tag. What? You did not get anything out of it? Yes. Porter, what does this mean? Yes. You are liar. Yes. You, hi, you are one, you want to write till did a great workshop and... Yes, so you were not actually doing the exercises, but simply observing the workshop. Yes. Yes. But you can still write a nice article about it that I am you have probably at least understood the introduction telling about what this workshop is. And you have seen what happened, that Jesus and me went around and helped the people and so you have enough what you have observed which you can write about, and it would be nice. And if you tell me when you have written about it that I can see it, that I can tell it on my open printing news and wherever to motivate people. That's great. So, did you like the workshop? Yes. And one thing for everyone, you have the slide deck. You can see the second part also where you can learn how to make the updated repository, the updated snap getting into the Snap store. Yes, we have here a success story. Pushkar Kulkarni has done the exercises and is seeing the snapcraft.yaml updated. Thanks. Yes, it seems that we have here another person who is closely for Johann Halbeck, is closely to finishing it too. He is editing the app 1 to make a new version out of it. A little edit and then tagging it. And be careful if you release a new generation. New generations, they have often an incompatible API. And therefore, we have in the snapcraft.yaml some rule defined that we do not want to auto-update into a new generation, which is 2.0.0 in our case. And so if we want to update in our example, we have to choose a version number, which is not a new generation. So something which is lower than 2 and not 0.9. 1.0.1 or 0.4.0, all these would work. Simply must be newer than the version number which we had in the example as you have forked it. And do not forget to push also the tags, not only the code change itself, minus tags. Or are you doing the changes in the web interface? I think in GitHub this works too. I've never done it. Did it work? Yes, and for him the workflow also worked. He got an updated snapcraft.yaml. Yes, and this was the workshop. Thank you very much who is still here. And I hope you all enjoyed the workshop.